I think they've got problems. I wouldn't say they've got major problems. Obviously, 3 players have departed. The trick is always buy when you're strong. So he needs to buy players. You can't win anything with kids. You look at that line at Manchester United today, and Aston Villa at 2:15 when they get the team sheet, it's just going to give them a lift, and it'll happen every time he plays the kids. He's got to buy players, as simple as that.
He was nuts. Alan Hansen had the power to destroy careers before managers could even react. One comment from this man could crush a teenager, derail a manager, or turn a whole club into panic mode. He was not just some bloke on the telly giving his thoughts. He was a Liverpool legend, a man who won everything, and when he spoke, the entire country listened. But how could one pundit hit harder than the defenders on the pitch? For 22 years, Alan Hansen sat on the match of the day sofa like a judge passing sentences. His verdict was final. If he said you were rubbish, you were rubbish. If he said your team was finished, your team was finished. He did not use soft words. He used words like diabolical, shocking, naive, and embarrassing. These were not just criticisms, they were death sentences for confidence. And the scary thing is, he had the credentials to back it up. 3 European Cups, 8 league titles with Liverpool. Who could argue with that? But over the years, something darker emerged. Players started talking, managers started fighting back, and fans started noticing a pattern. Hansen was not just tough, he was toxic. His words did not just analyse the game, they got inside heads, broke spirits, and changed the actual outcome of matches. Let me show you exactly how this happened. August 1995. Manchester United just lost 3-1 to Aston Villa on the opening day of the season. It was messy, the defence looked all over the place, but there was a reason. Manager Alex Ferguson had made a huge gamble. He sold 3 of his best players. Mark Hughes, Paul Ince and Andrei Kanchelskis were gone. In their place, he put kids, academy lads, teenagers like David Beckham, Paul Scholes, Nicky Butt and the Neville brothers. The football world was shocked. Everyone thought Ferguson had lost his mind. Then Alan Hansen delivered the line that would define his entire career. He looked straight into the camera and said, "You can't win anything with kids." 5 words. That was all it took. He tore apart Ferguson's entire plan in 1 sentence. He said, "The trick is always to buy when you are strong." He said, "The team sheet would give opponents a lift." He said, "United still did not have enough, even with the players they had." Hansen was not predicting a tough season. He was declaring it over before it even started. Now imagine you are Phil Neville. You are 18 years old. You just played your first big match and it went badly. You go home, turn on the telly, and there is your hero, Alan Hansen. A man who won everything, a defensive legend, and he is absolutely destroying you on national television. Phil Neville later said it hit him like a punch to the gut. Not just a bad review, a punch. He said it was devastating. And here is the worst part. Neville admitted that in that moment, he believed Hansen probably had a point. Think about that. An 18-year-old kid who should be full of confidence now doubts himself because a pundit said he could not win. That is not analysis. That is psychological warfare. Hansen was not some random Twitter troll. He was a legend who had won everything in the game. For a teenager sitting at home, watching his idol dismantle his career prospects felt like the end of the world. But Hansen was wrong. Badly wrong. Those kids he trashed went on to dominate English football. They won the league. They won the FA Cup. They beat Liverpool in that FA Cup final with a goal from Eric Cantona, the same Cantona that Hansen said would not be enough to save the season. By May 1996, United had won the double. The kids proved Hansen completely wrong, and Hansen had to admit it. He had to eat his words on live television, but the damage was done. Phil Neville spent months carrying that punch to the gut. He spent months wondering if Hansen was right. Yes, it all worked out in the end. Yes, they used it as fuel, but that does not erase the pain Hansen caused in the moment, and this was just the beginning. Fast forward to 2011. Chelsea hired a new manager, Andre Villas-Boas. He was only 33 years old, young, fresh, full of ideas. He wanted to play a high defensive line, press hard, and dominate games. It was modern football, but Alan Hansen hated it. He thought it was naive. He thought it was arrogant, and he made sure everyone knew. Hansen went after Chelsea's defenders like a man on a mission. He called Jose Bosingwa terrible and embarrassing. He said Bosingwa was so bad that he made David Luiz look like a world beater by comparison. Embarrassing. That was the word he used. Not poor, not struggling. Embarrassing. That word strips away all professional dignity. It says you do not belong at this level. You are a joke. Then Hansen turned his sights on David Luiz. Gary Neville had already said Luiz played like a 10-year-old on a PlayStation. Hansen took it further. He said Luiz would not know what a good position is if it was staring him in the face. Again, not just criticism. This was mockery. This was a legend telling the world that Luiz was clueless. Andre Villas-Boas could not ignore it anymore. He was a young manager trying to build authority in a dressing room full of experienced players. And every week, the nation's top pundit was calling his tactics naive and his players embarrassing. So AVB hit back. He said Hansen had a loss of reality. He said Alan does not have the privilege that I have to work with these players. This was a rare moment. A Premier League manager publicly fighting with a pundit. That shows how much damage Hansen was doing. David Luiz also felt the need to respond. He said he laughed about it. He said he was a simple and laid-back guy. But you do not publicly respond to criticism unless it hurts. The constant media attacks created a crisis atmosphere at Stamford Bridge. The narrative that the defence was embarrassing became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Confidence collapsed, results got worse, and eventually Chelsea sacked Villas-Boas. Here is the irony. After AVB left, Chelsea brought in Roberto Di Matteo. They used the same defenders Hansen had destroyed. Bosingwa, Luis, all of them. They abandoned the high line and played deep and defensive. And they won the Champions League. The very players Hansen said were terrible and embarrassing went on to lift the biggest trophy in club football. Hansen's criticism of their ability to defend was completely wrong, but by that point, a manager had already lost his job, reputations had been shredded, careers had been damaged. Then there was Manchester City. When City rose to power with money from Abu Dhabi, they faced huge resistance from the old guard of British punditry. Hansen, along with Graham Souness and Mark Lawrenson, formed what many saw as a Liverpool old boys club. They did not like the new money. They did not like the foreign players. And they made no secret of it. Hansen's main targets were Mario Balotelli and Carlos Tevez. He did not just criticise their football, he went after their characters. He called Balotelli a damaging distraction. He said Roberto Mancini was wrong to keep him. Hansen wrote that most top managers would identify a problem and get rid of the cause. He was not talking about tactics. He was talking about getting rid of a human being, a young man trying to adapt to a new country. Even when Balotelli played well, Hansen stayed negative. The focus was always on his baggage, his antics, his problems. Never the goals, never the talent. When City had setbacks, Hansen blamed the circus around Balotelli. He ignored tactics. He ignored injuries. It was always about the character of the player. Then there was Carlos Tevez. When Tevez had his dispute with Manchester City, the criticism from Hansen was brutal. His colleague Mark Lawrenson said Mancini should use and abuse Tevez before kicking him out. Hansen agreed. Use and abuse. That is the language they used for a professional footballer. Not support, not manage. Use and abuse. But here is where it gets really ugly. While Hansen was destroying Balotelli and Tevez for their behaviour, he stayed silent on Liverpool's Luis Suarez. Suarez was found guilty of racially abusing Patrice Evra. It was a massive scandal, but Hansen barely said a word. He did not call for Suarez to be removed. He did not say Kenny Dalglish handled it badly. He protected his own. This double standard was glaring. Hansen was happy to call Balotelli a damaging distraction who should be got rid of. But when it came to Suarez, a Liverpool player involved in a racism scandal, Hansen went quiet. Fans noticed, players noticed. It looked like bias. It looked like Hansen protected Liverpool while tearing everyone else apart. There is another uncomfortable detail. Steven Gerrard's autobiography mentions an incident where Hansen made a coloured comment on Match of the Day and had to apologise. This happened. Hansen himself admitted it and said sorry. But when you put that alongside his relentless attacks on black and foreign players like Balotelli, Tevez and Bosingwa, a pattern emerges. It felt like an old boys club passing judgment on a modern, diverse league they no longer fully understood. And the ultimate irony, Manchester City won the league in 2012. The very players Hansen said should be discarded were central to it. Mario Balotelli, the man Hansen called a damaging distraction, provided the assist for the most famous goal in Premier League history. Sergio Aguero's title winner against QPR came from a Balotelli pass. The circus striker delivered the league title. Hansen's entire narrative was destroyed in one moment. So why was Hansen's punditry toxic? It was not because he was harsh, plenty of pundits are harsh. It was because his words carried so much weight that they became part of the story. When Hansen said, "You can't win anything with kids," it was not just an opinion, it became a burden that Phil Neville carried for months. When Hansen called Chelsea's defenders embarrassing, it was not just analysis. It created a crisis that contributed to a manager losing his job. When Hansen called Balotelli a damaging distraction, it was not just criticism. It dehumanized a young man struggling in a new country. Hansen spoke in absolutes. Players were not just poor, they were diabolical. Teams were not struggling, they were gone. Managers were not making mistakes, they were naive. His language left no room for recovery. Once Hansen passed his verdict, it stuck. It echoed through the media, it filtered into dressing rooms, it changed how fans saw players. And in some cases, it changed how players saw themselves. Look at the vocabulary. Diabolical suggests moral failure, not just a bad match. Shocking frames a player as unworthy of their level. Naive implies stupidity. Embarrassing strips away all dignity. These are not words you use if you want to help someone improve. These are words you use to destroy. And Hansen had the power to define the narrative. A loss for a team he liked, like Liverpool or a strong Ferguson side, was just a blip. A loss for a team he scrutinised, like Arsenal or Chelsea or City, was evidence of a crisis. This framing mattered. It influenced how fans reacted. It influenced how club owners reacted. When Hansen declared Chelsea's defence embarrassing, it validated the panic that leads to sackings. The way Hansen operated was calculated. He did not just watch the match and give his thoughts. He built narratives that lasted for weeks, sometimes months. Once he decided you were a problem, he would hammer that point home every single week. Balotelli was not just criticised once. It was relentless. Week after week, the same message. He is a distraction. He is damaging the team. Get rid of him. This repetition made it impossible for players to escape the shadow of his judgment, and it created a feedback loop. Hansen would criticise a player, the newspapers would pick it up, fans would start doubting. The next match, everyone would be watching that player extra closely, looking for mistakes. When the mistake came, and it always does in football, Hansen would pounce again. "See, I told you." Diabolical. This cycle destroyed confidence faster than any opponent ever could. What made it worse was Hansen's tone. He did not sound angry or emotional. He sounded certain, like he was stating facts, not opinions. When he said, "You can't win anything with kids," he did not say, "I think," or "maybe." He said it like it was a law of nature. That certainty made it impossible to dismiss. If Hansen said it with such confidence, maybe he was right. That doubt crept into the minds of young players, managers under pressure, and fans desperate for answers. Hansen also had a way of making tactical criticism personal. When he attacked AVB's high defensive line, he could have just said, "The system does not suit these players." But instead, he called the players embarrassing and the manager naive. He turned a football debate into a character assassination. It stopped being about tactics and became about competence, intelligence, and worth. The power dynamics were crucial too. Hansen was untouchable. He had his legend status. He had the BBC platform. He had 22 years of authority built up. When AVB tried to fight back, it made him look defensive and weak. When Luiz tried to laugh it off, it made him look like he could not handle criticism. There was no way to win against Hansen. If you ignored him, his words stood unchallenged. If you responded, you looked rattled. The pundit always had the upper hand. This is what made Hansen toxic, rather than just tough. He used his immense credibility as a weapon. He knew his words carried weight that could break spirits, and he showed no mercy. There was no balance in his analysis when he had decided someone was a problem. Balotelli could score a hat-trick, and Hansen would still find a way to focus on the baggage. That is not analysis. That is an agenda. The impact stretched beyond individual players too. Hansen shaped how English football viewed foreign influence. His attacks on Balotelli and Tevez fit into a wider narrative about foreign mercenaries lacking the right character for English football. Meanwhile, British players and managers were given more leeway. This created a culture where certain players were judged by different standards based on where they came from. That cultural bias made the league less welcoming for overseas talent at a time when the Premier League was becoming global. Hansen also influenced how we talk about defending. His obsession with diabolical defending made clean sheets and defensive solidarity the only acceptable measure of success. Teams that tried to play out from the back or defend with a high line were mocked. This conservative view held English football back tactically for years. Managers were scared to innovate because they knew Hansen would tear them apart on Saturday night. But here is the strangest thing. In every case, Hansen was wrong. The kids won the double. The PlayStation Defender won the Champions League. The damaging distraction won the league. Every single devastating verdict Hansen delivered ended up being disproven by silverware. Yet, in the moment, the damage was real. The pain was real. The careers disrupted were real.